At 8 years old, you'd already be working a 14-hour shift. No breaks, no safety gear, no choice. This isn't a story from some far-off war. This was normal life for millions of children just 150 years ago. Factories, coal mines, machines that didn't care how small your hands were. So here's the question. Could you survive a single day as a child laborer during the Industrial Revolution? Let's find out what your life would actually look like. Your day starts before the sun does. 4, maybe 5 in the morning. No alarm clock. A factory bell does that, or your mother shaking you awake, because if you're late, you don't just get in trouble. You lose a day's wages your family can't afford to lose. You don't eat much. Maybe bread, maybe nothing. There's no time, and there's barely any food to spare anyway. You walk to the factory or the mine in the dark, sometimes for miles, because school isn't an option. This is your childhood now. Inside, the noise hits you first. Deafening, constant, machines running non-stop. This is a textile mill, and your job is to crawl underneath massive spinning machines to fix broken threads or clear jams, while the machine is still running. Why you? Because you're small enough to fit where adults can't. That's the whole reason children were hired in the first place. Not because factory owners cared about giving kids opportunity, because small hands were cheap and small bodies could reach places grown workers couldn't. One moment of exhaustion, and exhaustion is guaranteed after a 14-hour shift, and your hand is in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fingers, hands, sometimes entire limbs were lost to these machines. There was no safety switch, no guardrail, no one stopping the line for you. If you were hurt, the machine kept running and someone else took your spot. Coal mines weren't any safer. Children as young as 5 worked as trappers, sitting alone in pitch darkness for 12 hours, opening and closing ventilation doors so miners could get through. Alone, in the dark, for half a day. Your body doesn't get to grow up normally. Years of hunching over machines twist your spine. Breathing in cotton dust or coal dust all day damages your lungs before you're even a teenager. Malnutrition stunts your growth. Doctors at the time had a name for it. They called children like you stunted. Not sick, not injured. Stunted. Like it was just an accepted fact of how you'd turn out. Fall asleep at your station, which happens because you're a child running on 4 hours of sleep and no real meals. And you'd be beaten. Overseers walked the factory floor with straps or sticks specifically to keep tired children awake. Some factories even had a person whose only job was slapping children who started nodding off. That was a real job, keeping exhausted children conscious, by force. After all of that, after 14 hours, after the danger, after the exhaustion, you'd earn a fraction of what an adult made. Some children were paid in pennies a day, others weren't paid directly at all. The money went straight to a factory apprenticeship system that barely resembled freedom. You weren't working for yourself. You were working to keep your entire family from starving. And even then, it often wasn't enough. This isn't guesswork. We know exactly how bad it was because governments eventually investigated. In the early 1800s, British parliamentary committees interviewed child workers directly, asking them to describe an average day. Children as young as 6 described working from before dawn until after dark, describing beatings, describing coworkers losing fingers beside them. These weren't rare horror stories. They were routine enough that officials heard the same account over and over from mill after mill, child after child. So, what did you get in return for all of this? Sundays, usually. The one-day factories mostly stood still. But even then, you weren't free. Many children spent it doing chores, caring for younger siblings, or simply sleeping to recover before the cycle started again. There was no real concept of childhood the way we think of it now. No play, no school, no rest that wasn't just your body forcing you to stop. The line between working and living barely existed. And if you were a girl, the danger multiplied. Long hair caught in spinning machinery was one of the most common causes of scalping injuries in textile mills. Common enough that some factories required girls to keep their hair tightly bound, not out of care, but to keep the machines running without interruption. Girls also filled many of the apprenticeship positions in workhouses, where the line between labor and outright servitude barely existed. Being a child laborer was brutal. Being a girl doing it came with an entirely separate set of risks. Here's the part that's easy to skip past. A lot of these kids never made it to adulthood at all. In industrial cities like Manchester and Liverpool, the average life expectancy for factory workers was in the teens. Not a typo. 15, 17 years old. Cities were so deadly that populations only kept growing because people kept moving in from the countryside to replace the ones who died. Historians estimate death before 25 was simply common for child workers, from accidents, from lung disease, from exhaustion-related mistakes that got you killed on the job. So this wasn't just a hard childhood you'd eventually grow out of. For a lot of kids, this life, and the risks that came with it, was the only life they'd get. So let's be honest with ourselves. 14-hour shifts, no food, no safety, constant risk of losing a limb, or your life, beaten if you fall asleep, paid almost nothing, and you'd be expected to do this every single day for years, starting as young as 5 or 6 years old. Most of us complain about a single stressful day at school or work. Children like this didn't get a single day off to complain. Eventually, this system started to break, not because factory owners suddenly grew a conscience, but because reformers, journalists, and eventually laws forced change. Photographers documented these children's conditions and showed the public what was really happening behind factory walls. Slowly, child labor laws, minimum working ages, and mandatory schooling started replacing this reality. But it took decades of fighting to get there, and in some parts of the world, this exact scenario is still happening today. So, could you have survived it? Honestly, most of us couldn't last a single shift. If this made you think differently about how easy modern life actually is, that's the point. Let me know in the comments what era you think you could actually survive. And subscribe, because next time we're finding out if you could survive something even worse.